To recap, the Horizon model was originally around finding new revenue streams spread out over time from today, H1, through the distant future, H3. The innovation industry then changed those definitions to be the level of innovation, whether continuous improvement, incremental innovation, or breakthrough or disruptive innovation. Neither of those models work perfectly. What we want to do is measure the horizons based upon the amount of evidence that we have that a particular initiative will work and how long we believe that will take to come to fruition. Check out this week's rant for the final conclusion on the Horizon model. Like, subscribe, share. Thanks much. Hi, Brant Cooper here. I'm fortunate I get to travel around the world speaking with startup founders, investors, ecosystem developers. I've learned a lot in my travels. I've got some stories, and I have some thinking that I love to share. Welcome to Brant's Rant. So then we get off into the H2s and the H3s. And so I think that in the H2s is often what large successful businesses call innovation. And so I'm going to put companies like 3M in this bucket. They do the invention, and all of the inventions, they're not even H3s yet. Maybe invention is H4, but they do all of these inventions, and then they start looking for applications for those inventions. The moment that they've got some amount of evidence for the market, the commercialization prospects of a particular invention, then that becomes an H3. And so then you start running these market tests and you start running the experiments and again, practicing that innovation mindset. And you get to a certain level of proof that the business says, okay, this is an H2. And then in the H2 model, that's where you have to prove that, yes, in fact, there's a business there that's capable of producing revenues that are at the H1 level. So the current revenue, the current product line revenue strength. So that's an example of an H3 or an H4 even starting there and then moving into the H3 and then moving into the H2. But there's also all sorts of parts, normal work that the core business does that is going to discover, I believe, where H2s happen. And so that's adjacent markets that maybe, you can't just extend into there, but you actually have to tweak a product significantly enough or add additional services or different partnerships in order to create what Jeffrey Moore called the whole product. In other words, all of the products and services required in order to provide the complete value to the customer. And so, you're working in the core business, maybe as sales or as in marketing or in products, customer service. You're doing this empathy work, you're understanding your customers. You can start discovering these ways. The technology actually exists inside the business. And maybe it's combining products in different ways. Maybe it's like the Siemens example where you're actually, scaling back a product, or maybe it's investing in expanding in it in order to go after another market. Maybe it's tweaking it in a way to go after a different region. Back in 2009, I went on the first Geeks on a Plane trip that was organized by Dave McClure. And we went to Japan and Beijing and Shanghai. It was an amazing trip. One of the things that we learned were, these tech companies, like I think it was Yahoo, who took their existing products into China with their existing, Western style user interface, and of course got completely, crushed. And so there's an example, right? I mean, if we're going into different cultures and different regions, we have to tweak our product, but we also have to go and learn that first. We don't just tweak it and then go. We actually have to put teams in place there in order to test what the need is and what the market, just sort of beginning, going back to that beginner's mindset. And so that's practicing that innovation mindset again. But so how long is that going to take? Well, it might take 2 or 3 years, or depending on the country, it might take 5 or 6 or 7 years. So that could potentially be an H3. So again, to repeat myself ad nauseum, it's not about the amount of effort, the level of innovation, or, even necessarily the scale of the new business that you're creating. So again, I think that the alchemy of growth is sort of a little anachronistic in that point. H3s are not just running in 1,000 examples in order to hope you get that one, $500 million idea. What you want is to run all of those experiments, because if they produce, revenues incrementally that are part of an extension of your core business, right? So is that an extension of the core business if you launch your current business into another country? I'm guessing that's an extension. But if it takes 5 years, that's an H3. tweaking existing technology, tweaking existing products, combining products in a new way, looking at existing markets and seeing if, are there natural extensions to what you're doing in terms of the value that you're creating. Is if you look at the whole flow of a customer process, are you one part of that process and you can now expand to other parts of the process? So these are all become opportunities, ways to generate ideas, and those end up being where you start as H3s in these regards, because we don't really know how much evidence there is. If there's already evidence, then maybe it's an H2. But in that way, kind of all ideas that we're just starting out with are H3s or H4s, and until there's evidence, we don't really know what bucket to put them in. Generally, I've talked about before, I like the idea of empowering all employees to do this, because that's really the more likely way you're going to get to a big win. If you have 1,000 employees that are trying to find evidence for their ideas, then you're way more apt to find that than starting up this innovation lab and you've got 3 teams of 5 people and they're thinking really hard. So I think that kind of covers the H2s mostly. So what does that leave for the H3s? I mean, I guess I think that there's a value to doing futures work and trying to figure out what the world's going to look like 5-10 years from now, and what your industry is going to look like 5-10 years from now. But the team needs to be doing a heck of a lot more than just imagining. No, I know that sounds like fun, but I really think that for most businesses, the Horizon 3 level responsibilities, and maybe this goes into H4s. Maybe I'm going to invent an H4 here. You let me know what you think about my H4s here, but maybe what it is about these H3s, H4s is that those are the people that need to be tracking trends. So demographic trends, right? So there's your market very may well decrease because there's fewer young people, right? And they come of age where they normally would use your product, and there's just not that many anymore. You can't change that by investing in breakthrough innovation. You have to look at those demographic trends. You have to be watching startup trends, technology trends, and doing scouting on there. I think a lot of the jobs to be done principles, outcome-driven innovation in particular by Tony Ulwick are good ways to start imagining what the needs might be in the future and start doing empathy work around that. And maybe you can find some good experiments to run. And lo and behold, you may find something that actually could come to market way sooner. But a lot of that stuff, you get out there far enough, it's impossible to predict. And so that's one of the things that bugs me about the innovation industry peddling this, breakthrough innovation, is that, they really sort of are saying that if you think real hard, you'll be able to figure that out. And it's not true. It's just simply not true. And so I think that there's, kind of this research that one can do, looking at the trends, looking at the demographics, looking at what other technologies are out there, what's being invested in now, what are interesting ways that these things might be combined. So really, to have a successful program that's sort of this H3, H4 is really having this sort of open approach and being willing to talk to people and not being scared about, IP at this point and all of these other things that companies get excited about. And so there's definitely a particular mindset that is, wants to be involved in that and is good at it. And those are ways to start spurring ideas that then can be experimented upon. And that, in combination with what might be emerging from leaders in terms of what their needs are, or needs that are being captured by account managers and marketing people and product management and customer service. And I think it's also important to have a way for your engineering teams to get out there, because they have sort of that invention mentality often. And so if you can combine that, right, the invention mentality out there on the edge, learning about sort of these trends and the needs and how needs are going to be evolving, right? Needs actually don't evolve that much, right? Needs don't change. The way the needs are addressed is what changes. And maybe I'll talk about one of these times, but it's certainly in my book, Disruption Proof, the need for needs portfolio analysis, really more than product portfolio analysis, And yeah, we'll talk about that in the future. But I hope you found this, breakdown on the horizons helpful. Again, your horizons should be based upon the amount of evidence for an idea and how far out that idea is from fruition, and really fruition at scale. And that should determine, where, in what horizon it belongs. And then you need to establish what are the metrics that help you determine whether, how they move from one to the other. And there's a lot of danger fraud in there, right? Because core businesses grabbing onto those ideas too early will kill them. But on the other hand, those H2s should be benefiting from the assets of the core business. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in the future. I call that a docking station that needs to connect to the business unit. But it really requires the business unit to understand and to have adopted it at a particular level, this idea that everybody needs this innovation mindset, and that the real trick is figuring out how to balance the execution and the exploration all throughout the business. So remember, if you like, subscribe, share with people, give me feedback, comments. Go to brantcooper.com to learn more about the upcoming book and ways that you can get involved for the book Disruption Proof. Thanks much. Hey, thanks for listening to Brant's Rant. If we're choosing capitalism here as a society, then let's make it work for a better world. If you'd like to join me as we redefine capitalism for the 21st century, go to beatcoop.co/D4A. Also, if you have a pressing issue that you're facing in your innovation group, your product group, your startup, and want to join me on video, see the link below. Subscribe, like, see you next time.